In today's class, we will take up the fourth and the last module of the development of gastrointestinal tract. So, in this module, we'll be having a short recap of the previous three modules, and we'll be discussing in detail the development of the hindgut and the derivatives of the hindgut. In the last classes, we have seen that the epithelium of the digestive system and the parenchyma of its derivatives originate in the endoderm, whereas the connective tissue, the muscular components, and the peritoneal components originate in the mesoderm. We have also seen that the gut system extends from the oropharyngeal membrane to the cloacal membrane, and this primitive gut tube is divided into the pharyngeal gut, foregut, midgut, and the hindgut. The pharyngeal gut gives rise to the pharynx as well as the related glands. We have seen in detail the development of the foregut and its derivatives. The foregut gives rise to the esophagus, the trachea, and the lung buds. It also gives rise to the stomach and the duodenum, proximal to the entrance of the bile duct. In addition, the liver, the pancreas, and the biliary apparatus develops as outgrowths of the endodermal epithelium of the upper part of the duodenum. We have also seen that the upper part of the foregut is divided by the tracheoesophageal septum into the esophagus posteriorly and the trachea and the lung buds anteriorly. The epithelial liver cords and the biliary system grows out into the septum transversum and later on differentiate into the hepatic parenchyma. We have also seen that the pancreas develops from a ventral bud and a dorsal bud and later fuse to form the definitive pancreas. In the last class, we have studied that the midgut forms the primary intestinal loop. The midgut gives rise to the duodenum, distal to the entrance of the bile duct, and continues to the junction of the proximal 2/3 of the transverse colon with the distal 1/3. At its apex, the primary intestinal loops remains temporarily in connection with the yolk sac through the Wittlein duct or the Wittler intestinal duct. And last class, we also studied one important event or process that is happening during the development of the midgut, that is the physiological herniation. So during the 6th week, the primary intestinal loop grows so rapidly that it protrudes into the umbilical cord, and this process being termed as physiological herniation. And during the 10th week, it returns back into the abdominal cavity. And while these processes are occurring, the midgut loop rotates 270 degrees in a counterclockwise direction. Before we take up the development of the hindgut, we will see something about a structure called as allantois or allantoic diverticulum. So this allantois or allantoic diverticulum is a small endodermal diverticulum which arises from the yolk sac near the caudal end of the embryonic disc. So this allantoic diverticulum or allantois is a small endodermal diverticulum which arises from the yolk sac near the caudal end or the tail end of the embryonic disc. And this diverticulum later on grows into the mesoderm of the connecting stalk. And after the formation of the tail fold of the embryo, the part of this allantoic diverticulum is absorbed into the hindgut. Now, it passes from the ventral side of the hindgut into the connecting stalk. We will refer once again to this allantoic diverticulum or the allantois when we take up the development of the hindgut and its divisions. Before that, we'll see what is the fate of this allantois or allantoic diverticulum. The developing urinary bladder is continuous cranely with the allantois, and it is somewhat uncertain whether the allantois actually contributes to the formation of the urinary bladder. But what happens is that the allantois atrophies and is seen in the postnatal life as a fibrous band, which is called as a urachus. So the allantois atrophies, and after birth, it is represented by a fibrous band, which is called as a urachus, which is present in the median umbilical ligament. And this fibrous band or the urachus extends from the apex of the bladder to the umbilicus. Now we will study the development of the hindgut in detail. The hindgut gives rise to the distal 1/3 of the transverse colon, the descending colon, the sigmoid colon, rectum, and the upper part of the anal canal. So the hindgut forms the distal third of the transverse colon, the descending colon, the sigmoid colon, rectum, and the upper part of the anal canal. It is very important to note that the endoderm of the hindgut also forms the internal lining of the urinary bladder and urethra. So the contribution of the hindgut in the formation of the urogental system we'll consider along with our class in the development of the urogental system. Now we will see what happens to this allantoic diverticulum. This allantoic diverticulum opens into the ventral aspect of the hindgut. So this allantois or the allantoic diverticulum opens into the ventral part of the hindgut. The part of the hindgut caudal to the attachment of the allantoic diverticulum is called as the cloaca. The part of the hindgut caudal to the attachment of the allantoic diverticulum is called as the cloaca. The cloaca soon shows a subdivision into a broad ventral part and a narrow dorsal part. And these two parts of the cloaca are separated from each other by the formation of a septum, which is called as a urorectal septum. This urorectal septum is first formed in the angle between the allantois and the cloaca. So the important points to note that the allantois opens into the ventral aspect of the hindgut. The part of the hindgut caudal to the attachment of the allantois is called as a cloaca, and the cloaca is divided into two parts, a broad ventral part and a narrow dorsal part by a septum called as a urorectal septum. The ventral subdivision of the cloaca is called as the primitive urogenital sinus, and as its name suggests, it gives origin to some parts of the urogenital system. So the ventral part of the cloaca, which is called as primitive urogenital sinus, is concerned with the development of the urogenital system. The dorsal part or the dorsal subdivision of the cloaca is termed as the primitive rectum. The dorsal part of cloaca is termed as primitive rectum, and as the name suggests, the primitive rectum forms the rectum and part of the anal canal. Now this urorectal septum grows towards the cloacal membrane and eventually fuses with it. Now the cloacal membrane is divided into two parts or two membranes, a ventral urogenital membrane related to the urogenital sinus and a dorsal anal membrane which is related to the rectum. So the fusion of the urorectal septum with the cloacal membrane divides the cloacal membrane into two parts or two membranes, a ventral urogenital membrane and a dorsal anal membrane. Now we'll see something about the anal pit, or also called as the proctodeum. The mesoderm around the anal membrane becomes heaped up with the result that the anal membrane now comes to lie at a bottom of a pit, and this pit is termed as the anal pit or proctodium, and the anal pit contributes to the formation of the anal canal. So the mesoderm around the anal membrane becomes heaped up, with the result that the anal membrane comes to lie at the bottom of a pit called as the anal pit or the proctodium. And this anal pit or the proctodium later on contributes to the formation of the anal canal. Later during development, with the formation of the tail fold and growth of the embryo, the urorectal septum comes into contact with the cloacal membrane, and we have seen it divides the cloacal membrane into two parts, the urogenital and the anal membranes. Later on, rupture of the anal membrane creates the anal opening for the hindgut dorsally, and rupture of the urogenital membrane creates opening for the urogenital sinus ventrally. So, the rupture of the anal membrane creates the anal opening for the hindgut dorsally, whereas a rupture of the urogenital membrane creates opening for the urogenital sinus ventrally. The point of contact of the tip of the urorectal septum and the cloacal membrane becomes a perineal body. So the point of contact of the tip of the urorectal septum with the cloacal membrane later on becomes the perineal body. We will once again examine the derivatives of the hindgut. The pre-allantoic part of the hindgut gives rise to the left 1/3 of the transverse colon, the descending colon, and the pelvic or the sigmoid colon. The pre-allantoic part of hindgut forms the left 1/3 of transverse colon, the descending colon, and the sigmoid colon. And we have seen that the post-allantoic part forms the cloaca, and it's divided by the urorectal septum into the primitive urogenital sinus and a primitive rectum. And this region of the hindgut gives rise to the rectum, the upper part of the anal canal, and also some parts of the urogenital sinus. And you also have to note that the artery of the hindgut is the inferior mesenteric artery. The artery of the hindgut is the inferior mesenteric artery. We will study the most important objective of this session, namely the development of rectum and anal canal. The rectum is derived from the primitive rectum. The anal canal develops from two different components, one endodermal component and one ectodermal component. The upper 2/3 of the anal canal is derived from the endoderm of the hindgut, that is the primitive rectum, whereas the lower 1/3 of the anal canal is derived from the ectodermal proctodium or the anal pit. These two parts are separated by the anal membrane initially, and later this membrane ruptures and the line of junction of the endodermal and ectodermal parts is represented by the anal valves. You already studied that the anal valves form a demarcating line called as the pectinate line. To summarize, the rectum is derived from the primitive rectum, and the anal canal develops from two different sources, one endodermal and the other one ectodermal. The upper 2/3 of the anal canal is derived from the endoderm of the hindgut, that's a primitive rectum. The lower 1/3 of the anal canal is derived from the ectodermal proctodium, and the junction between these ectodermal and endodermal parts is represented by the pectinate line. Now we'll try to correlate the development of the anal canal with the gross anatomy, which I have already studied. So we've already seen that The anal canal develops from two different sources, endoderm and ectoderm, and these two parts are separated by the pectinate line. The blood supply of these two parts differs. The arteries supplying the upper part of the anal canal are the superior rectal artery, whereas the lower part is predominantly supplied by the inferior rectal artery. The venous drainage from the endodermal part, that is the superior part of the rectum, goes into the portal vein, and the venous drainage from the ectodermal part is into the systemic veins. There is also a difference in the nerve supply of these two parts. The endodermal part of the anal canal is innervated by autonomic nerves, whereas the ectodermal part is supplied by the somatic nerves. And there is also a change in the lining epithelium between the two parts. Above the pectinate line, the anal canal is lined by a columnar epithelium, whereas below the pectinate line, the anal canal is lined by stratified squamous epithelium. So you should be able to correlate the gross anatomical features of anal canal with its development. Now we'll see what are the important congenital anomalies related to the development of the hindgut. Recto-urethral and recto-vaginal fistulas may be caused by abnormalities in the formation of the cloaca and or the urorectal septum. Then you can get recto-anal fistulas or atresia, which may vary in severity and may leave a narrow tube or just a fibrous remnant connected to the perineal surface. The third important congenital anomaly related to the development of hindgut is called as imperforate anus. The imperforate anus occurs when the anal membrane fails to break down. And another important anomaly related to development of hindgut is termed as congenital megacolon. The congenital megacolon is due to absence of the parasympathetic ganglia in the wall of the intestine. So this is also called as an egg ganglionic megacolon or Hirschsprung's disease. These ganglia are derived from the neural crest cells, which you have studied earlier, and these cells migrate from the neural folds to the wall of the bowel. Cases of congenital megacolon involve the rectum, and in more than 80% of cases, the defect extends to the midpoint of the sigmoid colon. Before we conclude, we'll try to see what are the important questions from this development of hindgut. One important question you can get is about the allantois or the allantois diverticulum and its fate. The second important question is about the cloaca. So you should be able to note the subdivisions of the cloaca and the derivatives of the cloaca. And the third and the most important question from this topic is the development of the anal canal. And you have to correlate the gross anatomy of the anal canal with its development. That this finishes our classes on the development of the gastrointestinal tract, and in the next embryology class we'll be taking up the development of the urogenital system, and we'll be starting with the development of the kidneys. Till then, stay safe. Thank you.